Hi, welcome to ERP Evolution, where we help your ERP system evolve. In today's video, we're going to venture into some new territory with our first look at Acumatica, where we're going to use an export scenario to learn how to update data en masse. So stay tuned for that coming up next, but first a word from our sponsors. An arris is the sharp edge formed by the intersection of arches. Where the two complex shapes meet, a simple shape is formed. At Arris Consulting, the arris represents the point where the complex becomes simple. Whether you need implementation assistance, training, or business intelligence services, Arris Consulting is there to help your ERP system evolve. Arris Consulting, we make the complex simple. Today we'll be using an export scenario as a tool to mass update data. In this case, we want to run an update against stocked items in a specific item class to have a new PI cycle, as they did not get assigned when they were initially created. First, we'll go to Inventory, then Stocked Items, and here we can see a list of all the stocked items in the ELECOM 400 class. As you can see here, they do not currently have a PI cycle assigned to them. That's what we'll be doing with our export scenario. But before we can create an export scenario, we first need to create a data provider. You'll find this under Integration, Profiles, Data Providers. Here we'll create a new data provider. Give it a name and select Generic Inquiry Provider for the provider type. The next piece of information that we'll need is the screen ID that we want to pull our data from. To find our screen ID, we just need to go back to the stocked item screen that we looked at earlier, and under the Tools menu, we will find our screen ID. In this case, IN 2025PL. So we'll enter that back on the data provider screen. Then we click the Fill Schema objects to add the results set to the data provider and mark it active. The Fill Schema Fields button can be used to add all the fields to your data provider, but note that it does add all the fields. With a little editing magic, we've unchecked the active box on the fields that we don't need to show for this case. Now that we have our data provider defined, we can create our export scenario. You can find this under Integrations, Profiles, Export Scenario. We'll create a new scenario now. We'll give our new scenario a name. Pick the screen name for our stock items. This time we want the detail screen though instead of the list screen. Choose the data provider we just created. Don't forget, best practice is to save early, save often. On the Mapping tab, we'll need to add the necessary fields for our export scenario. Most of the entries here will have the source object of Stock Item Summary. Our first field is Inventory ID. When we add this, Acumatica automatically changes it to the Inventory CD key for us. Checking the Commit box automatically adds the Action Cancel row for us. This box also indicates that a database update is required. Selecting the equals every in the field value column causes the data to be processed one record at a time as opposed to a massive list. This is required for when we want to update the record. We'll add the item class as it'll be used in our next step. And then there's the reason we're here. From the general physical inventory object, we'll add the PI cycle. And this we want to set to our static value of monthly. This is me from the future here to tell you that I should have enclosed that string value in single quotes. And then our last item of note here is to add the action save. This allows us to save the record upon updating it. Our final task is to add a source restriction. In our scenario here, we only want to update certain records and not all records. Accordingly, we'll add a source restriction so that only the item class ELECOMP 400 gets updated. Now it's time to run our scenario. Under Integrations, Transactions, we want to select the Export by Scenario. This is where we actually execute all of our scenarios. This will automatically open the first scenario on the list. If you need to, go ahead and use the lookup to select your desired scenario. The Prepare button will execute the scenario and update our data. And finally, if we go back to the stock items list that we started with, we can refresh it and see that our PI cycle did in fact change to monthly. And there you have it. We've successfully updated our data using an export scenario.